Okay, hello everybody. When I went through my organizational stuff for your term paper, I found here 10 pages, including table of contents and bibliography. And since I gave you here some hints what you should write, then I saw that maybe also including bibliography and table of contents, which will be also roughly each one page will be maybe a little bit too short. So I just cut this and yeah, so that you roughly just write 10 pages. But if you are quite focused and you see I have said everything what I want to say within 8 or 9 pages, then of course it is also okay. But I suppose that you will also show some tables and diagrams, and then it will not be that easy. Okay, so I will then update this, and I put this then also in Moodle with this update. Okay, so that's the first one. The next one is that in my macro course, I invited a guy from the Bundesbank who gives a little talk about the interest rate policy of the in Europe and in Germany. And well, the title we have talked about this, I think, in the end of March. Therefore, an interest rate break, so to speak, because since the mid of summer last year, we stay at the same interest rate level from the ECB. Well, during this time, it happens that the crazy guy has initiated the war in Iran, and now the inflation is increasing. So maybe we will see in the next weeks a reaction of the central bank. So it will be also from an international point of view interesting to look what is happening in what is happening to interest rates and to interest rate policy from a European perspective. So you are, of course, invited to join on Wednesday here at S123 to follow this lecture. Okay, so that's it. And then we come to the content of the lecture. We have talked especially about tariffs, and there we had introduced this, a general model in order to ask, what happens if a large country or a large region is entering the world market and is initiating a tariff. And when we analyzed this, we saw that it is not that easy as in the model when we had the small country, because then we could definitely say, well, that the tariff is harmful from a perspective of welfare, and if welfare is calculated via producer surplus and consumer surplus. This was these two little triangles, B and D, which would be the overall loss of welfare if one is introducing a tariff. And within the general model, we saw, okay, that the tariff is driving somehow a wedge between world supply and world demand, but that then, of course, also the prices in both countries are changing, and that then, in general, we have in the country which is initiating the tariff, at first, the same picture as we have it in the model with the small country. So also we have an increase due to the tariff, and then the overall loss for consumers of A plus B plus C plus D. But we have an increase because now more home firms are competitive. So we have an increase of producer surplus of A. But now the overall income from the tariff is not only C, but this is C plus E. And then the question is maybe this E, area E, is this outweighing the little triangles C and D? And then, of course, we can argue that there will be a so-called optimal point to set your tariff, because just from a geometric interpretation, we can say, since this area E is a rectangle, that if you are starting to introduce a tariff, that at first you have this linear increase due to the length of the rectangle of this area E, which is, so to speak, quite large, because it's just increasing if you are going downward. And that in the beginning, you are starting at the upper point of the triangles, and at first, these triangles then start to open. So at first, the area of increase will be quite small of these two um, triangles. So this means at the starting point, if you start with a small tariff, then it should be the case that this area E is larger than the two small triangles C and D. But then also, since these triangles are opening and the rectangle increases still due to its length, and we have also to admit that this length of the rectangle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller when you are increasing the tariff, that then there will be quite fast a point where the additional area of the two triangles is outweighing the increase of the area E, or is outweighing the area E. So in the end, you can also calculate their so-called optimal tariff, where you are maximizing the difference between the area E and the loss of these two triangles C and D. But I think you see this, that from this geometrical interpretation, it is quite clear that if you do not have very inelastic demand and supply structures, that this optimal tariff will be very small. And maybe, yeah, somehow the idea of the United States is just that they have they see a very inelastic demand because the guy is always talking like this. Well, I increase the tariff by 50%, and this means I will earn 2 billion US dollars. But then he doesn't keep in mind that if he increases the tariff, this means an increase of price, and this means a fall in quantity, a lower quantity. And I think in his head, he doesn't see this general market reaction. Higher prices means lower quantity. Yeah. Anyway, um, then I said, okay, there could be this aspect, but then we went through the situation between the United States and the European Union. And then we saw in our trade relation, there is a kind of an asymmetry that we export physical goods mainly to the United States and that we import mainly services from the United States. And that these two volumes have, yeah, more or less the same value. So it is a little bit more what we are exporting relative to the services we are importing, but they are roughly in the same area. So that in this case, if the United States starts to increase the tariffs on goods and we start to increase tariffs on the services, then it is definitely clear that both regions are losing. And yeah, right now we are in this situation because also the court in the United States just took all these tariffs that right now we have roughly this 10% tariff from the United States, which is still there. We have not introduced tariffs on the service sector, but it is not as he started it with 30, 40, or 50%. So it is a moderate, not a small, but it is a moderate tariff. So quite often it happens when this guy is announcing something that in the end the market is catching him. Okay, this, yeah, I went through this the last time that he also, yeah, published a one-pager in order to explain his nice little formula how to calculate all these bilateral tariffs with the world. And I said, you are writing a term paper. If you are writing something like this without explaining and actually in an economic way, this formula cannot be explained, then you will not pass. Anyway, I'm not that powerful as this guy, but still I have to value if this what you are writing is logical. This guy has not to argue in a logic way because he is the most powerful guy in the world. And we see if we in Europe, or we have to see how we in Europe will deal with this situation in the United States in the future. Because then all our ideas of free markets and this general win-win situation for everybody will fail. Um, yeah, okay. And yeah, I recommended also, I wrote a little paper with a friend of mine about this. This you can find in Viso, where we just dealt with this situation of this crazy guy and the relation between the European Union and the United States. So here again, I have all these, yeah, drawings. Again, here you find it, and then the question is this area larger than these two triangles? This was the bilateral model. So if you want, you can just try to use this demand and supply structure. So this would mean then that demand, oops, demand would be 55 minus 10 P, and supply, this is country A, would be 5 plus 20p, and the other way around here, P 52 minus 10p, and demand and supply is just 6p. So x, 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 and x. Okay, so and then now, well, I already said that somehow you use these this instrument as a policy instrument, and in order to to model such a strategic behavior in the last century, the first ideas were around 1930, 1940. We have a new field in economics, which is called game theory. Actually, it was mainly developed at first during the war, the World War II, to model, strategic concepts in this war, and later on in the opposition between the United States and the Soviet Union. And then there was in the 1950s a mathematician called John Nash, and he, formulated this concept of strategies which then could also, like within a market, reach an equilibrium. Then he formulated this concept mathematically rigorously, and therefore this is called a Nash equilibrium. I think in one or two other lectures you maybe also have already talked about game theory and Nash equilibria. It is true? Game theory? Okay, great. Your question, German or English? Yes, of course. This lecture is in English, or what do you mean by this? Because I just opened the chat, sorry. Oh, the talk of the other professor. No, since this is in my German macro course, so it will be in German. But maybe you can also follow a little bit in German. Okay, so yeah, then yeah, let's talk about this Nash equilibrium concept, and then we will use this concept in order to explain maybe the situation which we have right now in the world. Also, if we are looking not only on the relationship between the United States and the European Union, but if we look also on a third player, on China, for example. So what is a Nash equilibrium? A Nash equilibrium is a combination of strategies. So think of two guys in which both players chooses a strategy so that no other player, if you use only two, so that the other player and yourself has no incentive to deviate to another strategy. So what we are then will do in a minute. Think of you have two alternatives, and your opponent has also two alternatives. Then overall you have four possible outcomes. And then the concept is that we use for um, we use to analyze this situation, that we just say, well, what would be my best choice given the choice of the other is fixed? And this are doing both players simultaneously. And if then we reach a situation due to this analysis that no one of these two players has an incentive to deviate given this outcome, then we call this a Nash equilibrium. Well, the next slide, please do not be shocked. Looks a little bit yeah, complicated, but this is then, so to speak, mathematically written down what this Nash equilibrium is. And this is very, very famous in the 90s. He also was awarded then the Nobel Prize for this, because especially this concept was then used to analyze the trade relations and the development of trade relations after World War II. And maybe you have seen it already, or I recommend it. This is a quite famous movie. I think also It got some Oscars, and this is called A Beautiful Mind movie, and this movie is about the life of John Nash. He was, yeah, definitely a prodigy, genius, and you see that sometimes the very big ideas that they do not they do not need very much, because you see here the little paper where he wrote down his idea of this equilibrium is just 2 pages. You can download this, just click on it, or here you find his PhD thesis. And this is, if I remember it, also only roughly 20 pages. Well, and yeah, in order to explain this a little bit, then this means here S is a strategy combination. I, this is the guy, this is you, this is yourself, and S minus I means these are all the strategies of the other guy, and the star means no one has an incentive to deviate. And yeah, in general, we have n players, we have a set of these strategies, and what they are doing, we value this, of course, in economics with a utility function. And then such an equilibrium means that for all players I, this equilibrium means that the utility from this strategy combination is at least as large as all other strategy, the utility of all other strategy combinations, and of course that at least for one you have a larger utility. And in the end, this just means, and we will do this in a minute using a little example, that you again just maximize your utility, and maximizing your utility is again what you know from microeconomics. And so we can say in micro, you said maximizing U subject to the budget constraint. And what we are now doing in game theory, maximizing U subject the strategy of the other player is given. Well, and with a little smile, well, it's only these 2 pages, but in the end, behind all this is, yeah, really many stuff about topology and convex sets and so on. And in the end, one can say, maybe you have talked about this a little bit in school, that a function is nothing else mapping one set to another set. Let's say the function f of x equals x squared. This is a function of all real numbers, and since a square is positive or zero, then this is a mapping of the real numbers into the positive real numbers, including the zero. And what one can generally show is that if you have a function f of x, and this function is mapping a sphere onto itself, that then this mapping has to have a fixed point. And this was shown that this is true by Mr. Brouwer in the beginning of, I think, roughly 1910. And more or less, this paper just shows that if you define a problem like this, that this problem is equivalent to the existence of a function which is mapping a sphere on itself. Okay, just this for some explanations. And now we want to come to one specific situation with which we maybe can explain the today's situation in the world. And maybe you have also already talked about this in other lectures, and this is the so-called prisoner's dilemma. So now we are just looking at the European Union and the United States, and we go back 1 year around April. There was this struggle, and then Mr. Trump started to say, well, I want to increase the tariffs. And what have we done? Well, we also started, especially that if he starts the tariffs, as I said it, that we will start to increase tariffs on the service exports from the United States to the European Union. So in this case, then we could say both regions have two possibilities. One is we are choosing free trade. We let our borders still open. And the other one would be, well, let's introduce in general import barriers, or more specifically, let's introduce tariffs. Both regions have these two strategies. And then we ask ourselves, what will then happen to our utility in these four different strategy combinations? Well, and as I argued from this situation, using the concept of consumer surplus and producer surplus, that if we both introduce import barriers, that we will definitely lose. And this then means, well, if we simultaneously introduce import barriers, that with respect to our starting situation, we would have a loss of 5 billion. Oh, I'm in the English version, so this should be billion. Or is this possible? No. And here again. So if we both introduce a tariff, then as we have argued before, both players will lose. So we model this with minus 5 billion US dollars. Well, then the situation in the EU, we still let our borders open, and only the United States will increase their tariffs or introduce import barriers. Well, in this situation, still the United States have the opportunity to sell their products to the European Union without barriers. So they are profiting from these open borders. And additionally, as we have argued, they have this income from an introduction of tariffs. So then the outcome would be asymmetric, that in this case, utility would increase of the United States by 20 billion, while we have still the competition from the United States, and we have the import barriers of our exports into the United States. So our loss will be larger than the loss if we also have simultaneously increased trade barriers. So in this case, then plus 20 and minus 10 for the European Union. And I did it here in a quite easy way. So in a symmetric way, that also if we only increase the tariff or introduce import barriers and the United States let their borders open, that then we have this increase of plus 20 and the United States of minus 10. And the last situation, open markets. And in this case, well, we have, so to speak, not this double profit in these two asymmetric situations where we have the advantage from an open market and the advantage of additional income from tariffs, that then we also have an increase in utility, but it will not be that large as compared in this asymmetric situation of plus 10 and plus 10. Well, and definitely we see that in general this situation would be definitely better than this situation down here. But now we are using this concept of Nash in order to find out what will happen in such a situation. And as I have learned this in lectures quite often, students, if they are starting to analyze such a situation, they always think, well, if I do this, then the other one is doing this, and therefore I'm doing this. Think of this example, shooting a penalty in football. Well, if I will shoot in the left corner, because I know from history that in general the goalkeeper is jumping into the right corner, well, then the goalkeeper thinks, well, he knows that mainly I jump to the left corner, so today I will jump to the right corner. And then again, the forward is thinking, well, I know that in general he jumps to the left, but he knows that I know this. Therefore, today he will maybe then jump to the right corner, and therefore I will shoot in the other corner, and so on. But then you do not come to an end. So therefore, we will go quite slowly to through the analysis of this game, this example here. So we are starting with the United States. Given that the EU, and remember what I said, we are analyzing what should we do if the strategy of the other player is fixed. So we do not know what he is doing. We just assume hypothetically that the strategy of the other player is fixed. So let's start with that given EU is playing free trade. So this would be then FT and this we call IP. So, and now hopefully you will help me. What will we then compare? You are now in the situation of the United States. I do not want to have directly the answer. What I will do, we will go through slowly through this. So please explain me at which numbers you are now looking. How do you compare them? And then in the end, we want to have the outcome. You can also use your microphones. Oh, let's take green maybe. So if we are fixing the strategy of the European Union, then our 2 by 2 matrix for the analysis, so to speak, shrinks, because now we are looking only into the first column. This is fixed. And looking at this first column, now we are looking only at the utility of the United States. The utility of the United States, maybe this I should also say that in the brackets, the first part is the utility of USA and the second one is the one of the European Union. So and now is the point where students quite often, make a mistake in the analysis. Now, the second numbers in the brackets, they are not anymore of any interest for us. We are only looking at the outcome for the United States, given that the European Union is playing free trade. So we are comparing then that USA, oops, I want to use green. USA is now playing free trade. This means earnings of 10 billion versus USA is playing import barriers, and this means earnings of 20. Then we have 20 is larger than 10. So the best answer, given the free trade strategy of the European Union, would be that the USA is playing import barriers. And now we go on. United States, given the EU is playing import barriers, and maybe now you can help me, or is my micro not open? Again. Are you saying something? So in general, it should work. So the US either has -10, yes, because we are looking here at free trade, or -5, then we are comparing. -10 is smaller than -5, so we are choosing the option where we are obtaining -5. Great. So I write all this down here. So USA is now playing FT. This means -10 versus IB. This is -5. Then we have -10 is smaller -5. And again, USA is playing AB. Well, now maybe we just yeah, turn 90 degrees to the left, because now we are looking just at the lines, that we are doing the same with the European Union. USA is playing free trade. In this case, we are in the first line. So then our outcome, if we also playing free trade, would be 10. And this we have to compare with our strategy import barriers. So this 10 and this 20. Again, we have 20 is larger than 10, and EU is playing IB, and EU is EU given United States playing import barriers. Then if we playing free trade, we are now in the second line, -10, and playing IB, -5. So -10 smaller -5, and the best answer is also IB. And in analyzing these games into with the matrix, in the matrix form, then we quite often also just underline the best answers given the strategy of the other one. So for the EU, it would be these two, and in green for the United States, it would be this and this. And then, well, we have to look at a strategy outcome where simultaneously both players find their best answers, and then we see that this is only the case in the import barrier strategy combination. So IB is Nash equilibrium. Well, and now if you look at this situation, what is the pity? Or why is this outcome not so nice? Genau, or definitely, sorry. If we compare this with free trade, then, oops, I move myself back, then FT is Pareto superior to IB. Do you know the concept of Pareto efficiency? No idea. Okay, so Pareto efficiency, this is actually really a pity because, yeah, this concept of Pareto efficiency is just behind all our market argumentations. Remember the Ricardo model, or remember your micro course or any introductory courses. Then you said, well, you have here your market diagram, supply and demand. This was the consumer surplus. This was the producer surplus. Then we just argue using this price mechanism in order to reach the equilibrium. Then this equilibrium has the very nice property that it is a win-win situation for both. And we have argued what is the value trading in this equilibrium. For this, we used these concepts of consumer surplus and producer surplus. And the market equilibrium is just the situation where the sum of both values for the demanders and the suppliers, producer surplus and consumer surplus, has the largest value. So a market equilibrium is, so to speak, maximizing our welfare. And then we use the concept of Pareto efficiency. Pareto has nothing to do with something is equal or so, because it comes from Wilfredo Pareto. This was again an economist in the beginning of the 20th century, and he formulated a situation as an efficient situation, as an allocation of resources where it is not possible anymore to increase the utility of one guy without directly decreasing the utility of another guy. So there is in the end no possibility anymore for a win-win situation. Well, and why has this concept nothing to do with everybody has the same income or everybody has the same uh, uh, has the same, what can I say, possibilities to make a journey or something like this? Well, in general, we make the assumption more is always better. And then you can think of a very rich guy in a country who owns everything and all other people own nothing. Then we have a very unequal distribution. But this situation with the assumption more is always better is unfortunately also Pareto efficient, because if you take something from this very rich guy, then he would say, well, more is always better. I'm worse off if you are taking something from my income and distribute this to somebody else. So, in general, we say, or this is also the first theorem of welfare, that every market equilibrium is also Pareto efficient. And what we have here, and this was somehow the revolution of John Nash, introducing his concept of equilibrium, that we find here possibilities using the concept of utility maximization. So still our assumption of these homo economicus, this individual utility maximizer, that we find then plausible situations everybody is maximizing his or her utility, that we end up in a situation which is Pareto inefficient. So this is Pareto inefficient. But so to speak, in the analysis, nobody has done something wrong. And unfortunately, in the real world, we quite often find such situations which we can model with this so-called prisoner's dilemma. But do you know why it is called prisoner's dilemma? But I have to ask the guys who are studying here at our university in your introductory courses, you have heard about efficiency or Pareto efficiency, or because now you are in your fourth, fifth semester. And have you talked about the name prisoner's dilemma? Some feedback would be nice. Yes, that's it. So you have these two guys, two thieves, and you have no evidence against them, only if they say it to each other or for the other guy, well, he is guilty. He has robbed the bank, and the other one says also B has robbed the bank. And then you find from the outcome also that in general they would confess, Although, if they would have said nothing, they wouldn't go to jail and would be better off. Quite often, if you think about this, if you are seeing criminal movies, then in behind you will see that sometimes there is this prisoner's dilemma concept um, in the story. Okay, so this is, yeah, how maybe also we can explain the situation which we have right now, the behavior of the United States, the behavior of China, and somehow we in Europe, we know that we are worse off, but we are unfortunately in the situation that we have to deal more or less with two other players who do not care about this problem. And this is then modeled in the so-called evolutionary game theory, where you are going then step by step, that maybe we are then in the bad situation that we maybe have also to react in a similar way in the end. Okay, but I have talked a lot about this guy in the United States, that he is ignoring science in general. He is just playing golf or doing something else. Okay, so we will also talk about yeah, maybe how we can overcome this. So in general, let's say we are after the ending of World War II, and then we had this situation. Well, still there was this incentive to drop into the equilibrium of the prisoner's dilemma, but we started international negotiations, and on the other hand, quite often we find lobby groups. Think again about the United States, where Mr. Trump, yeah, has in the end won the elections in the United States. That he followed these lobby groups, or that he cared about these lobby groups, the so-called old industry part in the United States around the Great Lakes, automotive, steel industry, and so on. Um, yeah, so this trade war then can, as we have modeled this, arise if the countries have the incentive to introduce these restrictions, and in the end we come to a situation where everybody is worse off. And in order to prevent this, yeah, we need something like a superior agreement. And this was then more or less the development of the World Trade Organization. So, development of the WTO to overcome the problem of the prisoner's dilemma in international trade. Yeah, and then I found, or this was a colleague who showed me this. There's an English game show in the UK called Golden Balls, and if you click on this, there in the end, if I remember it right, it was also that you have two players, and in the end, they will only get the money if they both decide um, for the money. But they also, and it was constructed like this, that they also had this incentive in the prisoner's dilemma to deviate, so that in the end everybody is worse off. And if you just look at this nice video, then you see how there was one guy who tried to overcome this bad situation. Yeah, just have a look at it. And in Germany, as I said it, we have this famous series every Sunday evening, Tatort, and there's also one episode called We ESC, and this was also based on the prisoner's dilemma. 10 minutes left. Then, of course, this situation here, although I hopefully explained that these utilities here may be reasonable, of course, there could be other utilities in the outcome. And therefore, let's also look more or less at the situation which we have right now. And again, let's look overseas. And that then Mr. Trump not only wants to introduce import barriers or tariffs, that also he wants to change the overall global system. So to speak, that he wants to introduce new rules, how we have to deal with each other. And this, again, we can also model as two strategies. So one strategy would be, we have the UN, we have the World Trade Organization, we have all these institutions where we are negotiating, but then also we have to accept the rules which we have given ourselves. And Mr. Trump says, well, I don't care about the UN, I don't care about the World Trade Organization, so he wants to set new rules. So in this case, then we would have two strategies. One strategy would be accepting the rule, and one strategy would be setting new rules. And let's again say, both countries, again, United States, EU, United States, China, they have both these two strategies. And now we maybe could argue, well, if both countries wants to set new rules, but they wants to set own new rules, so that then we have really a large conflict between these two countries. And like in the prisoner's dilemma, then we would say, okay, maybe this conflict in the end is even a war. That then both are losing. But now I said it to make it a bit more realistic, that the loss is asymmetric. So let's say maybe country A is the United States. They are more powerful than the European Union, so their loss would be a little bit less than our loss, -2 and -4. So then country B, again, think of that is the EU. A is the United States. if we are accepting what Mr. Trump is doing, then maybe there's no such a hard conflict, or think of China and the United States, there will be no war. So the loss of country B is therefore smaller than in the other strategy combination. So a zero here, and since Mr. Trump has got what he wants, he is setting the new rules, he earns 10. In the other situation, it would be quite similar, but again, uh, a little asymmetry within this, that in this case, if country B is setting the new rule and country A is accepting this, the outcome for B would be 8 and for country A would be 2. And having still the given situation, then we assume, okay, we have, so to speak, peace, but I cannot do what I wanted to do, namely setting the new rules, so the outcome will be a little less than in the asymmetric situation where I set the rules. So quite similar to the prisoner's dilemma in the argumentation, but you see that we argued for other utilities and other individual utilities. And let's again analyze this as we have done this before. I think we make this in 5 minutes. Let's start with country A. Country A, given this, we know accepting rule and setting rule. Oops, this I should do in black. Accepting rule, setting rule, accepting rule, setting rule. So B plays accepting rule. What is then the best answer for country A? So which number I then have to underline? So we're starting in this column. Now again, only look at country A. The outcome is the first part in the brackets. We'll set new rules because this 10 is larger than the 4. Okay, so setting new rules. Then B is playing setting new rules. What is then the best answer for country A? This is then accept because 2 versus minus 2. So we choose this 2 and this is accepting the rule. So A plays accepting the rule. And let's go to country B. A is playing accepting rule. Then Now we are in the first line. Then you have to go to the second part of the brackets, the 4 and the 8. So setting rules is the best answer for B. And A is playing setting rules. Then we are moving in the second line. We have to compare the 0 and the -4. So this is the best answer, and B is playing accepting rules. Well, and now we have a different situation compared to the prisoner's dilemma, since we find here and here two equilibrias. Well, and now, unfortunately, at this point, the game theory has not, a mechanism which one is selected here. Well, in practice, we will find an equilibrium, but we do not know which one. But then we can go further in the analysis, and then maybe we answer if I'm really powerful and I really say, well, no matter what you are doing, I will set new rules. And this is maybe the nowadays situation between the United States and the European Union. Since we have no relevant military force, he is much more powerful so that he can really say, although this is the situation, that he can really recommend, I will set the rules. And then, in this case, if we believe him, then in the second step, we compare this setting new rules, and then we compare the -4 and the 0, and then we are following him. So, and this means there is a first mover advantage. So if you are really powerful and you are really convincible that you will set the new rules, maybe then you have the possibility to select this equilibrium. And this we have to keep in mind. And in Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, maybe he is always trying to do this, but the Iranis, they just don't believe him. Well, I think he mentioned 2 or 3 times that he will bomb on Iran, that the whole country is destroyed. Well, they haven't believed him. So maybe in the Strait of Hormuz, we have right now such a situation where we do not see in which equilibrium we are moving. And this, maybe you have talked in other lectures about this. This is also called the Hawk-Dove game. Because also in movies you see this, two crazy guys driving with two cars onto each other, and then the guy who is staying on the straight line, not moving to the right or left, that he will be the winner. But if they both going the straight line, then they will be dead in the end. So this is also the same situation as we have it here. And yeah, maybe I wrote also a little paper with my friend about this situation, and then we moved also a little bit further and introducing so-called reciprocal preferences that we care about the other one. But this is then deeper game theoretical analysis. So maybe you're interested in this. So then this it was for today, and see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.